Hey guys, so it's finally fall in Minneapolis, and I finally have this epic video coming your way that has been in the making for centuries. Maybe not for centuries, and maybe not in the making, but in the thinking. But anyway, so we're going to talk about the grand mastery of translation and interpreting. And we already had a video on the channel about chess and translation. So if you've been following, you know, and if you haven't been following, shame on you. No, I'm just kidding. Welcome to the channel. But we're going to continue to expand on that topic because chess has been a thrilling side study of mine. And in fact, I've been spending more time on chess, studying chess, than studying translation. And that definitely tells you I'm going to translation and interpreting hell. Maybe not. But here's my first question to you. If you know anything about chess, or even if you don't, you've probably heard the term Grandmaster, and that's a title, the highest title that is awarded to chess players. Unofficially, however, there's something called Super Grandmaster. So, just out of curiosity, would you place yourself in the Grandmaster or Super Grandmaster category? And to give you a comparison, there are currently slightly over 2,000 Grandmasters in the world, and only about 50 Super Grandmasters. So would you place yourself in the top 50 or top 2,000 of linguists in your language pair? If you're a translator, translation. If you're an interpreter, interpreting. Think about it for a second. Me being Vladimir, I would, but not in every language pair. I would place myself in the Super Grandmaster in the Russian, English, interpreting category, but it might be tight because there are a lot of really good interpreters out there. Also in translation, I would not place myself in that category in Spanish, probably not even in the Grandmaster category, but definitely Master or maybe International Master. So, and if you're not in that category, then there is something to strive for. There's nothing wrong with being ambitious or humbly ambitious. And that's maybe point number one that I actually want to talk about. And I'm just going to go completely randomly, no notes. I love notes in videos and lectures just as much as I love them in interpreting. And that's another reason I'm going to translation hell, as I try to take as little notes as possible. But that's not the topic of this video. So I've been watching interviews and reading articles about these chess greats, and they're not necessarily very modest people. In fact, they have a trait about them that I would call arrogant modesty, or modest haughtiness, or modest confidence, something of the sort. Like, for example, take Bobby Fischer, right? The great American prodigy and genius. And he would say things like, I don't necessarily consider myself a chess genius. I'm just a genius who happens to play chess. Or he would say something like, you know, these Soviets just don't have any very good players. I mean, I'm going to play Spassky, and he's the best they have got. But he's no match for me. And the commentator and the interviewer, but he's beaten you more than you've beaten him. And Fischer is like, so? Anyway, and he beat Spassky. And he beat him in the rematch too, although Spassky was a great player. And Magnus Carlsen, who is currently the top-rated chess player, he was asked in an interview that I recently watched, like, do you ever think, Magnus, that this guy might be as good as me? And Magnus is like, no. But at the same time, he was asked about other chess players, and he very respectfully said, yeah, I think that Fabiano Caruana, is number 2 in the world. And Fischer also was very reverent about Capablanca, the great Cuban chess player who was world chess champion number 3, I think. And when asked if he would beat Capablanca, Fischer was like, I don't know about Capablanca, he was a master.
Would you beat Capablanca in the match?
I don't know if I beat him. I mean, you know, if I don't make any mistakes, I can't lose.
Greške, onda ne bih izgubio.
But if he doesn't make any mistakes, he can't lose. It's hard to say who could beat who, you know, it's difficult.
Zato je teško.
You know, it's that quality of modest confidence or arrogance, if you will, that I think is very good to cultivate for professionals. Cultivate that quality in yourself, and naturally that quality is not just something superficially assumed. I mean, yes, you can assume it, you can fake it till you make it, but all these greats, Fischer and Tal and Magnus, they practiced like nobody's business. They were nerds. So that's the next analogy. Translation nerd, chess nerd, it's okay. And in fact, the player I just mentioned, Mikhail Tal, he beat another great Russian master. And don't worry, we're going to get more into the tactics and very detailed comparison in a bit, but I just want to give an overall picture first. So Tal beat Mikhail Botvinnik, who was a very calculating player, and Tal was this genius. He had these flares, incredible combinations, and he beat Botvinnik. And then the next time, when there was a rematch, he lost. So, and Tal did not prepare well enough, and he lost to Botvinnik the second time because he was just reliant on his talent too much. And sure, you can trust your talent, but talent is not a replacement for preparation. They have to go hand in glove or hand in hand. So now let's dive in and talk about the nitty-gritty of chess and translation. And I'm just going to fly by the seat, not the seam, of my pants. So Bobby Fischer actually had three main principles. At least this is how another modern grandmaster analyzes it. I don't know if Fischer would agree with it himself. One is don't ever tolerate the opponent's pieces on your side of the board. Two is to take as a mistake, as in do not exchange, do not oversimplify the position if it's not necessary, because it usually only benefits your opponent. And three, offense is the best defense, so attack. So how can we apply these principles to translation and interpreting? So let's start with number one, about not tolerating interference on your side of the board, because your side of the board is like your home, your kingdom. And one analogy that I've spoken about time and again is you don't tolerate, literally, interference with your performance by anybody else, by any other players, be it a lawyer, be it what do you call him, a monitor, a Czech interpreter, or an Albanian interpreter. No, I'm just kidding. A Czech interpreter is not an interpreter of Czech. A Czech interpreter is somebody who's monitoring your family. And I mean, yes, if there's a Czech interpreter there and they make a valid point, you have to be respectful of their right to make it, but you do not allow interference in your proper interpreting and translation and in your flow. So ideally you get rid of any and all interferences, and they can also be technical interferences, right? So you do whatever you must do to perform your job and to keep your confidence. And ideally, yes or no, you don't allow interference by anybody into your interpreting, which means you also have to be pretty darn good. Okay, point number two, to take is a mistake. So how do we actually apply this to translation and interpreting? It's not that to take is always a mistake. Obviously, if you can get a queen in exchange for a pawn or a bishop or a rook, or if you need to take in order to avoid a checkmate, I mean, obviously you want to do it, right? What is meant by this is don't oversimplify on purpose, or don't oversimplify just to oversimplify. And you might be thinking, Vladimir, you're getting way too profound, way too arcane for your own good and for ours. Like, how in the world does that even relate to translation and interpreting? But it does, because many interpreters, for example, will oversimplify positions by keeping their interpretation segments short, or by keeping the vocabulary simple, right? To simplify is a mistake, just like to take is a mistake in most cases, not in all cases, all right? And this is why I've always said, for example, you want to keep your interpretation segments long, because you have more room to maneuver, just like in chess. I mean, let's say you oversimplify it to king and king, it's an automatic draw, right? You do want to oversimplify when you have a material advantage, meaning more pieces, but to oversimplify in translation means to limit your options or to limit your juggling, because let's say that it's a minute long interpreting segment. Well, you can do a lot. You can put this here and you can put this here, and you can make it sound the most logical as an interpreting, as a translation that you're rendering as you can. Whereas if it's a one sentence or a half a sentence segment, you can only do so much. Same with translation. You could oversimplify by sticking to the grammar structure of the original, which we also know just from translation principles is wrong. But I know people who do that, and they do that because they're afraid to deviate, not from the meaning, but even from the structure, right? You could also oversimplify by choosing simple vocabulary, which just makes it sound less erudite and less fun. Now, there are times to simplify, just like in chess. You know, if I'm playing against a stronger opponent and I know they have better calculation skills and the position just seems way too complex because there are all these strings of possible exchanges going on, and if I'm just lost in my calculation and it's a blitz game, okay, I will simplify and make it more manageable, right? Same as with interpreting or translation. Let's say you're dealing with unknown territory, unknown vocabulary. I will simplify. Simplify by keeping it shorter, by using simpler terms, and so forth. Same with translation. Or let's say you know that your target audience are just not masters of the topic. Like just now I was editing a book by a choir conductor, and my constant message to her was, Maria, your thoughts are understandable only to you, not to the audience. We have to not necessarily simplify, but elucidate, make it more clear. So that's principle number 2. To take is a mistake, or to oversimplify is a mistake, unless you glean or gain some benefit from it. Point number 3 is just my favorite principle in life. The best defense is offense. If you get attacked, counterattack. So how do we do that? Beats me. I'm just gonna brainstorm here. So, but obviously we're not attacking our clients. Obviously we're not attacking other interpreters. We're attacking the problem. So the way that I use it is just to be daring and brave, you know, in your options. If I have to choose between an option in translation and in life that is more conservative or more daring and beautiful, you already know which side I will err on, right? On the side of incaution, on the side of beauty, on the side of aesthetics, on the side of a possibly beautiful combination, right? So at least that's one way that we can apply this principle. All right,